brows, where will and knowledge meet, a mighty voice invaded mortal space. As the voice touched her body became stark and a rigid golden statue of motionless trance. A stone of gold lit by an amethyst soul. Her heart listened to its slow, measured beat. Why comest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth, O spirit, O immortal energy, if it was to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with hard, tearless eyes awake thy doom. Arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 7, the Book of Yoga, which recounts Savitri's yoga. The first half of the book pretty much recounted Aswapati's yoga. And here, much of this book focuses on Savitri's search for her soul and the finding of her soul and the process leading towards that. That's followed by a couple of cantos that describe different aspects of her spiritual realization, nirvana, her realization of nirvana, and then of the cosmic spirit and the cosmic consciousness. In the first canto of the book, which we completed, Savitri underwent what might be called, or has been called, the dark night of the soul. So she was carrying this foreknowledge of Satchivan's impending death and feeling the grief of that, being overcome in a sense by that grief, although she hid it within so that Satchivan would not know, his parents would not understand. So she was holding all of that within her. But she was also swaying between feelings of love and happiness, being with Satchivan in the hermitage, their life together. But she would sway between these two moods of intense love and intense fear and anxiety and grief. So now she is sleeping with Satchivan awake while he is sleeping and experiencing these feelings. And then a voice comes to her. So we'll begin by reading through the canto one time, and then we'll go back over it again and examine it in more detail. So Helmut, we can start here. Okay. Page 474, Canto 2.
Canto 2, the parable of the search for the soul. As in the vigilance of the sleepless night, through the slow, heavy-footed, silent hours, repressing in her bosoms its loads of grief, she sat staring at the dumb tread of time and the approach of ever-nearing fate. A summons from her being's summit came, a sound, a call that broke the seal of night. Above her brows, where will and knowledge meet, a mighty voice invaded mortal pace. It seems to come from inaccessible heights, and yet was intimate with all the world, and knew the meaning of the steps of time, and saw eternal destiny's changeless scene. Feeling the far prospect of the cosmic gaze, as the voice touched, her body became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance. A stone of God, lit by an amethyst soul, around her body's stillness, all grew still. Her heart listened to its slow, measured beats, her mind renouncing thoughts hard and was mute. Why comest thou to this dumb, dead-bound earth, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, tired like a sacrifice on the altar of time? O Spirit, O immortal energy, if it was the nurse grief in the helpless heart, or with a heart tearless eyes awaits thy doom, arise, O soul, and vanquish times and death. But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, my strength is taken from me and given to death. Why should I lift my hands to the shut heavens or struggle with mute inevitable fate or hope in vain to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock their Savior light, and see in mind's wisdom soul's tabernacle in his heart speak and its inconscient base, a rock of safety and an anchor of sleep. Is there a God whom any cry can move? He sits in peace and leaves the mortal strength, impotent against his calm, omnipotent law, and inconscience and the Almighty's hands of death.
Thank you.
What need have I? What need has such a one to avoid the black mesh net, the dismal door, or call a mightier light into life's closet room, a greater law into man's little world? Why should I strive with earth's unyielding laws, or stave off death's inevitable hour? This surely is best, to practice with my fate and follow close behind my lover's steps and pass through night from twilight to the sun across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. Then could we lie in arm, breast upon breast, untroubled by thought, untroubled by our hearts, forgetting man and life and time and its hours, forgetting eternity's call, forgetting God. The voice replied, is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came? Or is this all for thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity, a listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws? Shall be no new tables, no new word, no greater light down upon the earth, delivering her from her unconsciousness, man's spirit from unalterable fate? Camest thou not down to open the doors of fate, the iron doors that seemed forever closed, and lead man to truth's white and golden road that runs through finite things to eternity? Is this then the report that I must make, my head bowed with shame before the eternal seat? His power he kindled in thy body has failed. His labor returns, her task undone. Then Savitri's heart fell mute. It spoke no word. But holding back her troubled rebel heart, abrupt, erect and strong, calm like a hill, surmounting the seas of mortal ignorance, its peak immutable above mind's air, a power within her answered the still voice.
Thank you. Let's go.
I am thy portion here, charged with thy work, as thou myself seated forever above. Speak to my depths, O great and deathless voice. Command, for I am here to do thy will. The voice replied, remember why thou camest. Find out thy soul. Recover thy hid self. In silence seek God's meaning in thy depths. Then mortal nature change to the divine. Open God's door, enter into his trance, cast thought from thee, that nimble ape of light, in his tremendous hush, stilling thy brain, his vast truth wake within, and know and see, cast from thee sense that veils thy spirit's sight. In the enormous emptiness of thy mind, thou shalt see the Eternal's body in the world. Know him in every voice heard by thy soul. In the world's contacts, meet his single touch. All things shall hold thee into his embrace. Conquer thy heart's throbs. Let thy heart beat in God. Thy nature shall be the engine of his works. Thy voice shall house the mightiness of his word. Then shalt thou harbor my force and conquer death. Then Savitri by her doomed husband sat, still rigid in her golden, motionless pose, a statue of the fire of the inner sun. In the black night, the watch of storm swept by, the wrath of storm swept by. The thunder crashed above her, the rain hissed, its million footsteps pattered on the roof. Impassive, mid the movement of the cry, the movement and the cry, witness of thoughts of mind, the moods of life, she looked into herself and sought for her soul.
Continue a little more. A little more.
Keep going? A dream disclosed to her the cosmic past, the crypt seed and the mystic origins, the shadowy beginnings of world fate. a lamp of symbol lightning hidden truth, imaged in her the world's significance, in the indeterminate formlessness of self, creation took its first mysterious steps. It made the body's shape a house of soul, and matter learned to think, and person grew. She saw space peopled with the seeds of life, and saw the human creature born in time.
Thank you.
At first appeared a dim, half-neutral ride of being emerging out of infinite naught. A consciousness looked at the inconscious vast, and pleasure and pain stirred in the insensible void. All was the deed of a blind world energy. Unconscious of her own exploit, she worked, shaping a universe out of the inane. In fragmentary beings, she grew aware, a chaos of little sensibilities gathered round a small ego's pinpoint head. In it, a sentient creature found its poise. It moved and lived a breathing, thinking whole. On a dim ocean of subconscious life, a formless surface consciousness awoke. A stream of thoughts and feelings came and went. A foam of memories hardened and became a bright crust of habitual sense and thought, a seed of living personality, and recurrent habits mimicked permanence. Mind, nascent, labored out a mutable form. It built a mobile house on shifting sands, a floating isle upon a bottomless sea. A conscious being was by this labor made. It looked around it on its difficult field, in the green, wonderful, and perilous earth. It hoped in a brief body to survive, relying on matter's false eternity. It felt a Godhead in its fragile house. It saw blue heavens, dreamed immortality. A conscious soul in the unconscious world, hidden behind our thoughts and hopes and dreams, an indifferent master signing nature's acts, leaves the vicegerent mind of seeming king. In his floating house upon the sea of time, the regent sits at work and never rests. He is a puppet of the dance of time. He is driven by the hours. The moment's call compels him with the thronging of life's need and the babel of the voices of the world. This mind no silent knows, nor dreamless sleep, in the incessant circling of its steps, thoughts tread forever through the listening brain. It toils like a machine and it cannot stop.
Thank you.
Into the body's many-storied rooms, endless crowd down from the dream god's messages. All is 100-toned murmur and babble and stir. There is a tireless running to and fro, a haste of movement and a ceaseless cry. The hurried servant senses answers apace to every knock upon the outer doors. Bring in time's visitors, report each call. Admit the 1,000 queries and the calls, and the messages of communicating minds, and the heavy business of unnumbered lives, and all the 1,000-fold commerce of the world. Even in the tracks of sleep, in scant repose. He mocks life's steps in strange, subconscient dreams. He strays in a subtle dream realm of symbol scenes. His night with the thin air visions and dim forms, he packs or peoples with slight drifting shapes, and only a moment spends in silent self. Adventuring into infinite mind space, he unfolds his wings of thought in inner air, or traveling in imagination's car, crosses the globe, journeys beneath the stars, to subtle worlds takes his ethereal course, visits the gods on life's miraculous peaks, communicates with heaven, tampers with hell. This is the little surface of man's life. He is this, and he is all the universe. He scales the unseen. His depths dare the abyss. A whole mysterious world is locked within. Unknown to himself, he lives a hidden king, behind rich tapestries in great secret rooms, an epicure of the spirit's unseen joys. He lives on the sweet honey of solitude, a nameless God in an unapproachable fane. In the secret atom of his inmost soul, he guards the being's covered mysteries beneath the threshold, behind the shadowy gates, or shut in the vast cellars of inconscient sleep.
Thank you.
The immaculate, divine, all-wonderful, casts into the argent purity of his soul his splendor and his greatness, and the light of self-creation in time's infinity, as into a sublimely mirroring glass. Man in the world's life works out the dreams of God, but all is here, even God's opposites. He is a little front of nature's works, a thinking outline of a cryptic force. All she reveals in him that is in her. Her glories walk in him and her darknesses. Man's house of life holds not the gods alone. There are occult shadows, there are tenebrous powers, inhabitants of life's ominous nether rooms, a shadowy world's stupendous denizens. A careless guardian of his nature's powers, man harbors dangerous forces in his house. The Titan and the Fury and the Jinn lie bound in the subconscious cavern pit, and the beast grovels in his antry den. Dire mutterings rise and murmur in their drowse. Insurgent sometimes raises its huge head, a monstrous mystery lurking in life's deeps, the mystery of dark and fallen worlds, the dread visages of the adversary kings. The dreadful powers held down within his depths become his masters or his ministers. Enormous they invade his bodily house, can act in his acts, infest his thought and life. Inferno surges into the human air and touches all with a perverting breath. Grey forces like a thin miasma creep, stealing through chinks in his closed mansion's doors, discoloring the walls of upper mind in which he lives his fair and specious life, and leave behind a stench of sin and death. Not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought and formidable formless influences, but there come presences and awful shapes, tremendous forms and faces mount dim steps and stare at times into his living rooms, or called up for a moment's passionate work, lay a dire custom's claim upon his heart. Aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more.
Thank you.
Afflicting the daylight and alarming night, invading at will his outer tenement. The stark gloom's grisly, dire inhabitants, mounting into God's light, all light perturb. All they have touched or seen they make their own. In nature's basement lodge, mind's passages fill, disrupt thoughts' links and musing sequences, break through the soul's stillness with a noise and cry, or they call the inhabitants of the abyss, invite the instinct to a forbidden joys. A laughter wake of dread, demoniac mirth, and with nether riot and revel shake life's floor. Impotent to quell his terrible prisoners, a pelt to householders helpless sits above, taking from him his house is his no more. He is bound and forced, a victim of the play, or alert, joys in the mad and mighty din. His nature's dangerous forces have arisen, and hold at will its rebels' holiday. Aroused from the darkness where they crouched in the depths, prisoned from the sight, they can be held no more. His nature's impulses are now his lords. Once quelled, or wearing specious names and vests, infernal elements, demon powers are there. Man's lower nature hides these awful guests. Their vast contagion grips sometimes men's world. An awful insurgence overpowers man's soul. In house and house, the huge uprising grows. Hell's companies are loose to do their work. Into the earth's ways they break out from all doors, invade with bloodlust and the will to slay, and fill with horror and carnage God's fair world. Death and his hunters stalk a victim earth. The terrible angel smites at every door, and awful laughter mocks at the world's pain, and massacre and torture grinned at heaven. All is a prey of the destroying force. Creation rocks and tremble top and base. This evil nature housed in human hearts, a foreign inhabitant, a dangerous guest. The soul that harbors it can dislodge, expel the householder, possess the house. An opposite potency contradicting God, a momentary evil's almightiness, has straddled the straight path of nature's acts. It imitates the Godhead it denies, puts on his figure and assumes his face. A Manichaean creator and destroyer, this can abolish man, annul his word, but there's a guardian power, there are hands that save, calm eyes divine regard the human scene.
Thank you.
All the world's possibilities in man are waiting as the trees waits in its seeds. His past lives in him, his drives his future space, his present acts fashion his coming fate. The unborn gods hide in his house of life, the demons of the unknown overshadow his mind, casting their dreams into life's molds of thought, the molds in which his mind builds out its world. His mind creates around him its universe. All that has been renewed in him, its birth, all that can be is figured in his soul, issuing in deeds its course on the roads of the world. obscure to the interpreting reason's gaze, lines of the secret purpose of the gods. In strange direction runs the intricate plan, held back from human foresight is their end, and the power intentions of some ordering will, or the order of the life's arbitrary chance, find out its settled poise and fated or surface washed in vain by reason gaze, invaded by the impromptus of the unseen, helpless records the accident of time, the involuntary trance and leaps of life. Only a little of us foresees its steps, only a little has will and purpose space. A vast subliminal in man's measureless part, the dream subconscious is his cavern base, abolished vainly in the walk of time. Our past lives still in our unconscious self, and by the weight of its hidden influences, it shapes our future self-discovery. Thus all is an inevitable chain, and yet a series seems of accident, the unremembering hours repeats the old acts, our dead past round our future's ankle clings, and drags back the new nature's glorious stride. Or from its buried crops, old ghosts arise, old thoughts, old longings, dead passions lives again. Recur in sleeps or moves the walking man, the words that force the barrier of the lips, the deeds that suddenly start the over lips. His head of reasons, his guardian will.
Thank you.
An old self lurks in the new self we are. Hardly we escape from what we once had been. In the dim gleam of habit's passages, in the subconscious darkling corridors, all things are carried by the porter neural nerves, and nothing checked by subterranean mind, unstudied by the guardians of the doors, and passed by a blind instinctive memory. The old gang dismissed, old cancelled passports serve. Nothing is wholly dead that once had lived. In dim tunnels of the world's being and in ours, the old rejected nature still survives. The corpses of it, slain thoughts, raise their heads and visit mind's nocturnal walks in sleep. Its stifled impulses breathe and move and rise. All keeps a phantom immortality. Irresistible are nature's sequences. The seed of sins renounced sprout from hid soil. The evil cast from our hearts once more we face. Our dead selves come to slay our living soul. A portion of us lives in present time, a secret mass in dim inconscious globes. Out of the inconscient and subliminal arisen, we live in mind's uncertain light and strive to know and master a dubious world whose purpose and meaning are hidden from our sight. Above us dwells a subconscious God, hidden in the mystery of his own light. Around us is a vast ignorance lit by the uncertain ray of human mind. Below us sleeps the inconscient dark and mute. But this is only matter's first self-view, the scale and series in the ignorance. This is not all we are, or all our world. Our greater self of knowledge waits for us, a supreme light in the truth-conscious vast. It seems from summits beyond thinking mind. It moves in a splendid air transcending life. It shall descend and make earth's life divine.
Thank you.
Truth made the world, not a blind nature force, for here are not our large diviner heights, or summits, our summits in the superconscious blaze are glorious with the face of God. There is our aspect of eternity. There is the figure of the God we are, his young, unaging look on deathless things, his joy in our escape from death and time, his immortality and light and bliss. Our larger being sits behind cryptic walls. There are greatnesses hidden in our unseen parts that wait their hour to step into life's fronts. We feel an aid from deep indwelling gods. One speaks within. Light comes to us from above. Our soul from its mysterious chamber acts. Its influence, pressing on our hearts and mind, pushes them to exceed their mortal selves. It seeks for good and beauty and for God. We see beyond self's walls our limitless self. We gaze through our world's glass at half-seen vasts. We hunt for the truth behind apparent things. Our inner mind dwells in a larger light. Its brightness looks at us through hidden doors. Our members luminous grow, and wisdom's face appears in the doorway of the mystic ward. When she enters into our house of outward sense, then we look up and see above her sun. A mighty life self with its inner powers supports the dwarfish modicum we call life. It can graft upon our crawl two puissant wings. Our body's subtle self is throned within in a viewless palace of veridical dreams that are bright, bright shadows of the thoughts of God. In the prone, obscure beginnings of the race, the human grew in the bowed, ape-like man. He stood erect, a godlike form and force, and a soul's thoughts looked out from earth-born eyes. Man stood erect. He wore the thinker's brow. He looked at heaven and saw his comrade stars. A vision came of beauty and greater birth, slowly emerging from the heart's chapel of light, and moved in a white, lucent air of dreams. He saw his being's unrealized vastnesses. He aspired and housed the nascent demigod.
Thank you.
Out of the dim recesses of the self, the occult seeker into the open came. He heard the far and touched the intangible. He gazed into the future and the unseen. He used the powers earth instruments cannot use, a pastime made of the impossible. He caught up fragments of the omniscient thought. He scattered formulas of omnipotence. Thus, man in his little house made of earth dust grew towards an unseen heaven of thought and dream, looking into the vast vistas of his mind on a small globe dotting infinity. At last, climbing a long and narrow stair, he stood alone on the high roof of things and saw the light of a spiritual sun. Aspiring, he transcends his earthly self. He stands in the largeness of his soul new-born, redeemed from encirclement by mortal things, and moves in a pure, free spiritual realm, as in the rare breath of stratosphere. At last, end of far lines of divinity, he mounts by a frail thread to his high source. He reaches his fount of immortality. He calls the Godhead into his mortal life. All this the Spirit concealed had done in her. A portion of the mighty Mother came into her as into its own human part. Amid the cosmic workings of the gods, it marked her the center of a wide-drawn scheme, dreamed in the passion of her far-seeing spirit to mold humanity into God's own shape and lead this great, blind, struggling world to light or a new world discover or create. Earth must transform herself and equal heaven, or heaven descend into earth's mortal state. But for such vast spiritual change to be, out of the mystic cavern in man's heart, the heavenly psyche must put off her veil and step into common nature's crowded rooms, and stand uncovered in that nature's front, and rule its thoughts and fill the body and life. Obedient to a high command, she said, time, life, and death were passing incidents, obstructing with the transient view her sight that must break through and liberate the God imprisoned in the visionless mortal man. The inferior nature born into ignorance still took too large a place. It veiled herself and must be pushed aside to find her soul.
Thank you. So now we'll go back to the beginning of the canto.
Canto 2, the parable of the search for the soul. As in the vigilance of the sleepless night, through the slow, heavy-footed, silent hours, repressing in her bosom its load of grief, she sat staring at the dumb tread of time and the approach of ever nearing fate? A summons from her being's summit came, a sound, a call that broke the seals of night. Above her brows, where will and knowledge meet, a mighty voice invaded mortal space. It seemed to come from inaccessible heights, and yet as intimate with all the world, and knew the meaning of the steps of time, and saw eternal destiny's changeless scene, filling the far prospect of the cosmic gaze. As the voice touched, her body became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance, a stone of God lit by the amethyst soul. Around her body's stillness, all grew still. Her heart listened to its slow, measured beats. Her mind, renouncing thoughts, heard and was mute.
Thank you. Let's pause there. The first sentence links the present action to the previous canto and even the previous book of fate. So she's in the vigilance of the sleepless night. She's awake, watching over Satyavan, unable to sleep or not sleeping. And the time is passing slowly, and she's repressing in her bosom, her heart, this load of grief, knowing that he has such a short time left, that she will have only this short time with him. And she sees coming this approach of ever nearing fate, this approaching death. Fate sometimes seems to be used almost as a substitute for death in the canto, in the book. But as she's awake, watching over Satyavan, some call comes from her being summit, like a summons, like a command. There is this kind of a legal term. A summons is an official command that you appear before the court, usually. So she hears this summons from her being's summit, a sound, a call that broke the seals of night, broke the seal of the darkness. Something from above comes and breaks that darkness that she's experiencing. And above her brows where will and knowledge meet, seems to be the forehead chakra, which is the center of will and knowledge. From there, this mighty voice came, seeming to come from inaccessible heights, from high above, and yet was intimate with all the world. Even though coming from high above, it seems to know closely all that is happening to her and in time, knew the meaning of the steps of time, as if it had this all-seeing wisdom that could see the past and the present and the future, and saw eternal destinies changeless seen, filling the far prospect of the cosmic gaze. Comes with this cosmic awareness of the meaning of the steps of time. And as the voice touched her body, became a stark and rigid golden statue of motionless trance. Sometimes, as meditation deepens and we connect with the higher consciousness, the body becomes rigid, motionless, to support that action of the higher consciousness, entering into trance. And he describes her sitting there in this motionless trance as a stone of God lit by an amethyst soul. Amethyst is a precious stone, purple quartz. So her body is like a statue lit up by this amethyst soul. And around her body's stillness, all grew still. Her consciousness also became very quiet and still. Her heart listened to its slow, measured beats. Her mind, renouncing thought, heard and was mute. Mind became quiet, silent, listening to this voice. So we'll continue.
Why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth, this ignorant life beneath indifferent skies, died like a sacrifice on the altar of time? O spirit, O immortal energy, if it was to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with heart tearless eyes await thy doom, arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, my strength is taken from me and given to death. Why should I lift my hands to the shut heavens, or struggle with mute, inevitable fate, or hope in vain to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock the Savior light, and see in mind's wisdom soul's tabernacle, in its harsh peak and its inconscient base, a rock of safety and an anchor of sleep? Is there a God whom any cry can move? He sits in peace and leaves the mortal strength, impotent against his calm, omnipotent law, an inconscience in the almighty hands of death.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So the voice questions Savitri, why camest thou to this dumb, death-bound earth, this ignorant life, beneath indifferent skies, tied like a sacrifice on the altar of time? It's kind of a question that pertains to all of us. Why have we come to this earth? If just to accept this fate of death, this ignorant life, like a sacrifice on the altar of time. And it refers to her, O Spirit, O immortal energy. It reminds her of who she really is. If 'twas to nurse grief in a helpless heart, or with hard, tearless eyes await thy doom. So it commands her, arise, O soul, and vanquish time and death. But initially, Savitri kind of rejects the voice. She says, my strength is taken from me and given to death. Why should I lift my hands to the shut heavens, or struggle with mute inevitable fate, or hope in vain to uplift an ignorant race who hug their lot and mock the Savior light, and see in mind wisdom's sole tabernacle? So This voice is asking her to vanquish time and doom, vanquish time and death. So maybe not just for herself, she senses, but for the ignorant race of humanity who hug their lot, who accept, hold on to their present ignorant life and mock the Savior light, make fun of the avatar who comes, the divine light, as if they don't exist. They see in mind wisdom's soul tabernacle. Tabernacle's a house of worship or temple. And they see in the inconscient base a rock of safety and an anchor of sleep. They hold on to their inconscient base, reject the higher spirit, hold on to the ignorant life. She says, is there a God whom any cry can move? It seems that God has forsaken us to this life of ignorance and death, as if He just looks from above on our present fate, unwilling or unable to do anything about it. He sits in peace and leaves the mortal strength impotent against His calm, omnipotent law. God has this law that seems all powerful of death, of ignorance for humanity. And man is impotent, has no power to change that. Impotent against inconscience in the almighty hands of death. Mm. Mm. Yeah, they're covering over the spirit, the soul, and the divine energy behind, of which, of course, Savitri is an incarnation of this divine, immortal energy, the Divine Mother. So she carries that within her. But now it's covered from her. She's unable to see it. She's unable to feel it or experience that power that's within her. It's still hidden in her soul, which she still has not realized. And that's true for her, but it's true for us That's probably what you're going to say.
Well, yes, because this is this universal thing.
Right.
For everybody.
Right.
So everybody hears the voice.
Right.
And everybody has to respond. Everybody says, why me? You know, because God screwed it up, or how am I going to go against these forces?
Right.
So this is the personal dilemma of the universal that is imposed on every soul.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do? So I think Savitri has to go through this to show us the way.
Perhaps that's also why he calls it a parable. In a sense, it's a story about, Savitri's experience here, but it's a universal story that applies to us all.
And she in particular, because we assume because of her destiny and everything that she figures it out from the beginning, but she doesn't. You have to learn this. See, and that's what she's doing. And what teaches her this is the pain, the grief. That's the spark. And that's why we have this so-called suffering. That's why we're on this altar of time. In order to wake up. And then he uses all those words like there's a Canto arise, awake, O soul, all of that. That's the voice that comes, as you said, from the avatar, who try to wake us up, but then people don't respond. And so then we say, okay, other people are not responding, so I don't have to read the scripture.
Yeah, there is a difference between mentally understanding or seeing something, because she already knows much of the story. Narad has revealed this to her. And we've read Savitri, and we know. But yet we have to go through that experience before we really know, before we realize, to make it real for ourselves in our depths of our being. And typically, as you say, it's through the suffering of the ignorant life that pushes us to find our soul and to experience it, not in our mind, but deep within the center of our being. Shall we continue?
What need have I, what need has Satyavan to avoid the black meshed net, the dismal door, or call a mightier light into life's closed room, a greater law into man's little world? Why should I strive with earth's unyielding laws, or stave of death's inevitable hour? This surely is best to practice with my fate, and follow close behind my lover's steps, and pass through night from twilight to the sun, across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. Then could we lie in arm breast upon breast, untroubled by thought, untroubled by our hearts, forgetting men and life and time and its hours, forgetting eternity's call, forgetting God. The voice replied, Is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came? Or is this all for thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity, a listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws.
Thank you. Let's pause. So Savitri is still rejecting the command of the voice, saying, why should I struggle with these laws of fate and time and death? Or call a mightier light into life's closed room, a greater law into man's little world. Why should I strive with earth's unyielding laws, its laws that are unchanging, unchangeable, or stave off death's inevitable hour, to hold off death's inevitable hour? She says, this surely is best, to pact ties with my fate, to form a pact, to form an agreement with her fate, with this fate of death. Accept it. And follow close behind my lover's steps. Follow him into death and pass through night, from twilight to the sun. To pass through death to the light of the divine, across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. So earth and heaven are divided by this river. This is from the mythology of, I don't know, Christian mythology, I think.
Also the Greeks.
Greek? Oh, yeah, the river Styx, yeah.
Across that, the Christians use it, everybody, the Buddhists use it.
Mm. Uh-huh.
Depends on your cosmology. It's funny, they all have that, you know?
Mm.
The raft, and the river, and the other shore. It's in all the traditions.
Mm.
But I guess it's a common human thing. You cross, or when you cross the river.
So it's interesting that they all perceive this something of one must cross over this in-between states after the death of the body, before arriving, let's say, in the psychic world or the light here. So she's saying why I can just follow him into death and we can have this eternal life in heaven, and why should I struggle with all these laws? Then we could lie inarmed, breast upon breast, untroubled by thought, untroubled by our hearts, forgetting man and life and time and its hours, forgetting eternity's call, forgetting God. Yeah, she still feels helpless, I think, to overcome death. She feels helpless. How can I do this? You want me to confront, overcome death. But death is this, eternal law that has always been. How am I to overcome that? She doesn't feel that strength yet. She hasn't realized it in herself. But this voice is reminding her and commanding her. So something in her, this higher self of hers, is conscious of the force, but she has to kind of make this connection still. Now it seems as if it's coming from above, from some inaccessible height. And the voice replies, "Is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came? Or is this all for thy being born on earth, charged with a mandate from eternity?" This mandate is an authoritative command. A listener to the voices of the years, a follower of the footprints of the gods, to pass and leave unchanged the old dusty laws. It's telling her, you have been charged with the command from God to change these old dusty laws. What are you going to do when you wake up and see that you've avoided your work on earth for which you've been born? You weren't born just to suffer and cry and accept this fate, this suffering. But again, to some extent, this also applies to each of us, especially those who have been called to Sri Aurobindo and Mother's yoga. Why have we been called just to follow the old life? the old fate. We're listeners to the voices of the years, followers of the footprints of the gods. So we too should confront this fate. Well, I'm suggesting that those who were at least called to this yoga but surely Savitri has a special role. She is the incarnate Divine Mother. So she has a special work to do to overcome this fate, to vanquish time and death. That was her role. And now we have to follow in her footprints. Okay, we'll stop there for today.
But Savitri's heart replied in the dim night, why should I strive with earth and yielding road, or stave off death's inevitable hour? This surely is best, to pactize with my fate and follow close behind my lover's steps and passed through night from twilight to the sun, across the tenebrous river that divides the adjoining parishes of earth and heaven. The voice replied, "Is this enough, O Spirit? And what shall thy soul say when it wakes and knows the work was left undone for which it came?"